Hi, this is Attorney Todd Hollis, and welcome to another episode of Civil Action. There's a lot going on today. President Biden has been elected, is now in the Capitol. We've got the insurrections that just happened at also our Capitol, and all the craziness is going on around us. But if you don't pay attention, you're going to miss a very huge race that's going on right now here in Allegheny County to determine who sits on our Court of Common Pleas for judge. But I've got some of the hottest candidates here for you right now who are going to introduce themselves and their respective platforms to you. Guys, welcome. Thank you so much for being a part of my show. How are you?
Well, Todd, thank you.
Good, Todd.
Awesome. I have got Chelsa Wagner, Mr. Giuseppe Rosselli, and Mr. George Heym, all great, attorneys. And I've known many of you for a number of years, and I know that your platforms are just kind of getting kicked off. So, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys coming here to be with me today. With that being said, let's get right into the show. I see you, Mr. Heym, at the top of my screen. Why don't you do me a favor and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Absolutely. My name is George Heym. I live in the city of Pittsburgh, grew up in the city of Pittsburgh, worked in the Allegheny County District Attorney's Office for about 7.5 years, prosecuting homicides and child abuse cases. For the last 15 years, I've been a criminal defense attorney. Some of your viewers may remember that I ran for Common Pleas Court judge in 2019, and my platform was criminal justice reform. Unfortunately, as we all know, things have only gotten worse, much worse. We've got systemic racism in the criminal court system. We've got ever-increasing incarceration, cash bail, overly long probations. Now, I hear many people say, well, we need sympathetic judges. I disagree with that. I don't think we need sympathetic judges. We need empathetic judges. And the difference is a sympathetic judge said, oh, hey, sorry to hear your story. Maybe I'll shave a month off your jail time. An empathetic judge looks at that person standing in front of them and sees their brother or their sister or their son or their daughter. And because of that, they're able to have the mindset that a person's worst day shouldn't define them. I myself am a product of Common Pleas Court. So I'm not only an attorney who's been appearing in court for over 20 years, I was in the court system. 40 years ago, I was the subject of a very contentious custody battle. And one judge, Paul Zavarella, did something out of the ordinary. He changed the law. And in doing so, he changed my life for the better. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. And that's because he thought outside the box. Now, that's an interesting backstory, but that's not really my point. My point is, I personally know what it means to be dragged into the court system. I personally know what it means to have no control over your fate. And that gives me the empathy to be the kind of judge who's willing to make changes. Most judges out there are just checking boxes. They get elected, they get on the bench, they do the same thing every other judge does. They do the same thing like giving overly long probations. They're checking boxes all day long. That's not what I want to do. I want to break the system down and I want to rebuild it so it's fair for everybody. I'm not going to check boxes. I'm going to think outside the box. Thanks.
Awesome. Mr. Rosselli.
Thanks, Todd. My name is Giuseppe Rosselli. I'm a criminal defense attorney and a trial lawyer. I've been practicing law for 20 years here in Allegheny County, throughout Western Pennsylvania, and in federal court. My wife and I spent about 20 years on the north side of Pittsburgh before we moved out to Bell Acres, near Swickley. So first, let me start by saying I've known George for a very long time, and he and I talk about these issues regularly. And everything he said, I want to incorporate, because a lot of what I have to say, he shares those same opinions. We may get to that point through different routes, but we both recognize that there is a deficiency, specifically in the criminal court system, as it relates to how we administer justice. My platform, you mentioned earlier that our platforms are just getting started. My platform is not just getting started. My platform is 40 years into it. I was raised a certain way, and the choices I've made professionally led me to the position that I'm in today based on that upbringing. Equality, fairness, and the thoughtful administration of justice. Those are the things that I've been saying, not just for the past 3-4 weeks that I've been campaigning, but for an entire career. When we look around at potential candidates and we have to decide who fits our needs for the bench, there are a couple things that I think are essential. One, you have to have some connection with the people that you serve. So if someone is coming before you and you are responsible for the administration of justice as it relates to that offender, you should have some understanding as to how that person lives, where they come from, the challenges that they face. I grew up in an interracial home in Allentown, Pennsylvania. My stepfather raised me since the age of 2. He is an African American. I only call him my stepfather because there has to be some understanding to the listener when I tell this story. The man raised me as his own. I have 2 biracial sisters from that marriage. About 10 years ago, I moved my entire family out to Pittsburgh to help me raise my family. I have a unique family in that I am raising an interracial family. My daughter, Evie, my first child, she's 12. She's African American. She's adopted. But I only tell you that again because you need to understand the story. That's my daughter. So when George talks about empathy, I can't speak from it in a way that my dad's experience was his experience. It wasn't my experience, but I witnessed it. My daughter's experience is going to be her experience. I won't experience that, but I'll witness it. When I decided to run for judge, it was about 3 years ago, and it's a very personal story. My daughter was 9 years old, and she had a social studies class, and she's learning about slavery. And you can see she was distraught by the content. She was confused by what she was reading. She had 3 questions for me after that lesson plan. The first, why? And I gave her an honest answer because I'm always honest with her. The second question, will it happen again? And I gave her the honest answer, I don't know. And then the third question was, if it does happen again, will you protect me? My run for judge is an effort to keep my promise to my daughter that I will do everything I can to protect her in the world that we live in today. So that's why I'm running for judge.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Wagner.
Yes, Todd, thank you. And it's great to join you and George and Giuseppe. I think all of us have some similarities in terms of how we come to this. And I commonly sum it up similarly to what I've said when I've run for offices in the past is I'm here because I want to do something and not be someone. And I often say that's a real clear litmus test when you're looking at candidates. You can usually tell if you really drill down. But I come to this from a unique position, admittedly. So I am an attorney, my law degree from the University of Pittsburgh, my undergrad from the University of Chicago. But shortly after I started practicing law here in Pittsburgh, I ran and was elected to the state house. And so I have spent most of my professional years here in Pittsburgh in public service, either in the state house or now as Allegheny County Controller. I have maintained some level of legal practice over the years, but my first priority and has been that oath that I took in terms of public service. And so what I believe that I bring uniquely to this race is someone who has really pushed institutions to really deliver on their promise. I think that's really what's defined my career in public service. A lot of that has been within the justice system. As a member of the state house, I served on the Judiciary Committee. We tried very hard at sentencing reform. We didn't always have the numbers, but my votes and my efforts there certainly reflect that. Transparency measures. But then moving to Allegheny County Controller, we've done a lot in terms of justice at the jail. And we all know there's a long way to go there. But I'm certainly proud that the efforts undertaken by myself and my office is what ended the private healthcare at the jail and really was able to shine a light on that. Other efforts, including making sure that juvenile inmates had their own pod, or making sure that nonviolent female offenders, pregnant female offenders, were not being held in the jail. I think that there have been some good things that all of you are well aware of. We have some good things to look at within our justice system here, but we have such great opportunity. And that's what is really exciting to me about this time. Most people, I think, in the county, and I don't know in terms of your viewership, don't realize that this is really unlike any other election for judge in Allegheny County, and that we're going to be electing just about a quarter of the local bench. And it's interesting to me because when I went into the state house, it was a major reform year, and we had 25% new representatives. That was after a lot of scandal, a lot of people that were pledging to reform. But then I noticed when we got there, a lot of people weren't focused on that. And I can give you an example where I got together all of my Republican counterparts, Democratic counterparts, and we did this kind of anonymously, but I put together this agenda where I said, okay, let's all put it down in terms of like a blind poll and say, what reforms are we really going to work on? And it was very disappointing and staggering how many I knew everybody had talked about on the trail were no longer part of it. I go back to, you had people who were wanting to be someone and not necessarily do something. So I think we have great opportunity of a lot of great candidates in this race. And so we really can change justice so that it is in fact just here in Allegheny County. And I believe that. And I think that's something that I could contribute to with my unique background and really thinking outside of the box and figuring out how we really push for reform using different synergies from grassroots advocates to grass tops leaders and business leaders and the like. I think people are all saying we want reform, so let's capitalize on it.
Totally agree. I've been on the bench, I've been practicing law, I should say, for somewhere around 27 years. And I think this is the first election where I know damn near all of the candidates. And it's refreshing because, I've walked up and down the hallways with many of you guys, and, I know you personally. So, it's good to know that there's going to be, people with experience, people who can provide empathy and people who really care about making change. And having said that, I have also a Facebook platform, and I've got probably about 5,000 members who are concerned about their elected officials and how they view certain things relative to civility and justice and all of the many great things that you guys have discussed. And I've created somewhat of a poll myself. And what I'm going to ask each and every one of you guys to do is to choose a number, 1 through 26, and I am going to read that member's concerns to you, and I'd like your respective thoughts. And then the other two candidates will have an opportunity to also add to that. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
All right. So why don't we start with Ms. Wagner first, since we finished with her, and then we'll circle all the way up to you, Giuseppe. Does that work? Awesome. Ms. Wagner, you have the floor. I need a number 1 through 26.
I'm going to go with 21, hoping that this year is a better year for all of us.
I like that number, Ms. Wagner. All right. It says, this is Larry W. Winston. He says, district attorneys who don't play favorites. Once that issue is addressed and rectified, our youth and community in general will have a fighting chance. What are your thoughts?
I believe that a judge really does have a big impact here. And so, when you look at our legal system, you really are supposed to have this sort of triangle where you have the defense, whether it's public defender or, a private defense attorney, your district attorney, and also the judge. And what we've seen over time is that so much of this power has shifted to the district attorney. One of the things that I believe are most important, which we know are more prevalent here in Allegheny County, but are a massive problem nationally, is the overuse or prevalence of plea deals. And so all of the individuals that don't have access to their right to a fair trial, because you see people being overcharged just to effectuate that win number. When you look at district attorneys' records, a lot of them judge themselves on that win number, and their plea deals go into that as seen as one of those victories in their kind of win category. So I think we really need to dismantle the entire system. And I believe judges have quite a lot of agency in their own individual courtrooms to address this, but also systemically. And so my philosophy is really that the role of a judge is two-part. One involves how they adjudicate those cases before them, which they have a tremendous impact on. And it's the obvious thing that everyone thinks of. But the second part is on that leadership and really being a steward of the justice system. So I think that, whether it is something going on in a courtroom, if I'm fortunate to be elected, if it's a courtroom that is next door to mine, I think we have a responsibility to call out those wrongs. And when there is overcharging and disparate treatment of defendants, we all have a responsibility to speak up and bring it to light.
Great points. Gentlemen, would you guys like to add to that?
Sure. The first thing I think we need, and judges have, frankly, a limited impact on that individually, but as a group could probably force change if we elect enough judges that want change, is the district attorney should not be prosecuting local police officers or investigating. That should be done by the attorney general, who doesn't have that close relationship with the local police departments. That we've seen this again and again. I mean, this is nothing new. For me, there's always a person that you can point to as a problem. We recently had a judge removed for blatantly racist remarks, right? He was a problem. He wasn't the problem. The problem is the systemic racism that fosters that kind of behavior. And I'll give you a good example. And I'll mention, you talk about knowing us. I've literally known you since I was in law school. You were a young, fresh attorney, and I was in law school, and we both campaigned for the same judicial candidate. We met at Dan Butler's house. That was like 25 years ago or something.
Wow.
But yeah. I mean, it's been a long time, and we've both seen again and again. So my example of systemic racism, and it's one of many, is representative juries. Right? Everybody thinks that it's one particular or a bunch of particular prosecutors that are striking people of color from juries. Now, that does happen, don't get me wrong. But the real problem are the jury pools, right? You've picked juries in Allegheny County. When you walk in to pick a jury, you'll have a pool of potential jurors of maybe 50 people, and that's where you have to pick your jury. I've done hundreds of jury trials over the years. I don't ever remember walking in that room and seeing out of those 50 people more than 2 or 3 people of color. Why is that? Why does the DA put up with that? Why do the judges put up with that? My response to that would be to walk into that room and tell the jury supervisor, pick another pool. Right? Judges have that power. I will not impanel a jury from this pool. Why has that never happened after all these years? So for me, it's those kinds of, changes that judges have to be willing to. Yeah, is it uncomfortable? Are you going against the stream? Yes. But if you get a bunch of us on the bench that think this way, we can really start to break, not just change, break down the system and build it back up. And, that's what and by doing that, you put the DA in a position where they can't play those kind of games.
Totally agree. I totally agree. Mr. Rosselli, what are your thoughts?
So, district attorneys playing favorites. Well, I think many district attorneys are focused on the wrong result, right? So we talk about young DAs, they get younger and younger. They get put into the general docket. So they're getting the bulk of the cases that come through. And oftentimes they are far more concerned about showing their supervisor that they got the conviction, they got the plea, than they are about making sure that not only is the offender being treated fairly, which I do believe is part of their role and function, but also there is also some benefit to the community based on what they did, what they chose to do, how they chose to prosecute a case. So when we talk about favorites, I don't know if it is an intentional act. I'm sure it is at times. I don't know if it's just a bias that exists within that individual. I'm sure that's the case sometimes. But most likely it is a bias that is developed through years and years and years of just, this is the way we do it. And it's thoughtless. And it has cost our communities the ability to grow. So it starts with the district attorneys. They are the gatekeeper. Actually, I apologize. It starts with the police. They are the gatekeeper. But the district attorneys have the law degrees. They need to be able to look at a fact pattern and make a determination as to what is not only best for the case, but is what is best for the community. And I do not believe that that is a function that they embrace in 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Rosselli. Thank you. Mr. Heym, pick a number 1 through 26, please.
I'll go with number 1 because it's controversial.
So I see you pre-looked the list.
Yeah, well, you sent it to me, so I looked.
Well, that's what I expect you to do as judge. So, all right. So this comes from one of our colleagues, which I believe many of you know, Patrick K. Nightingale. He says, as you know, cannabis reform is important to me. Most people in the criminal justice system are charged at the state level and not federally. But federal sentencing as a whole needs a fundamental reworking as it's downright draconian. That one charged federally with a drug felony can face 262 to 327 months. If they have 2 state felony drug convictions, it's just insane to me. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'll say this. I'm not running for federal judge. I know that that's an issue Pat faces very often. I'll break it into 2 parts. So first, I couldn't agree more. Federal mandatory sentences are literally insane. The few times I've represented clients in federal court, I've been aghast at what they try to get away with. Literally ruin a person's life over something minor. At the local level, we have some of the same issues. We should not be convicting people of minor drug offenses. We just shouldn't. It's an ugly cycle. You convict somebody of a misdemeanor drug offense, they now have a criminal record, they can't get that good job, they can't get certain apartments. So what happens? Maybe they reoffend because of that. If we get them treatment, it's not only better for them, it's better for society. Marijuana is a special subject because we now have legal medical marijuana in Pennsylvania, but the Pennsylvania state legislature refuses to change other laws to come into accordance with that fact. A very good example, and this is a pet peeve of mine, is marijuana-related DUIs. PA DUI law says if you have any amount of the metabolite of marijuana, and that's what your body creates when it breaks it down, and that can stay in your system for up to 30 days, you have committed DUI. There's no necessary, it's any amount. So what that means is that you can be driving 2 weeks after you ingested marijuana, not be under the influence, and you're technically committing DUI. And I've represented people in this situation, and the Allegheny County District Attorney's Office has refused to look at that logically. What that means, if you play it out, is that any legal medical marijuana user in Pennsylvania right now, anytime they get into a vehicle, they're committing DUI. Because if they use more than once a month, they're always going to have the metabolite in their system. So even if they do the right thing and they don't drive under the influence, they're still committing a crime under current PA law. That's outrageous. And, those are the kind of things that, obviously Pat and I both handle those issues on a regular basis, that judges should be putting their foot down. The law is unconstitutional at this point. It's unconstitutionally broad, as we say. It sweeps up innocent people along with guilty people. Yes, there's a reason to protect citizens from people driving under the influence. It's like saying if you had a beer 2 weeks ago and you drive tonight, you committed DUI. That's ridiculous. On its face, it's ridiculous. Yet our courts refuse to address the issue because it's controversial. We need judges that'll look at something like that and do an honest analysis of the law and then do what's right, not what's convenient.
Great points. Mr. Rosselli or Mrs. Wagner?
Sure, I'm happy to chime in. I think one of the positive things that I'm hopeful for on this question, particularly involving the federal sentencing, is that this is something that our new president and our new vice president have spoken to. Whether they can get things passed is a whole different ballgame. But I will tell you on a more humorous note, one of the things I said to some of my best friends who are a lesbian couple back when I was first elected to the state house, and they said, we are going to wait until gay marriage is legal in Pennsylvania to get married. They're my 40s, they're about my age. And I said, well, hey, we'll be in our 80s. And we'll all, smoke some marijuana and you'll be able to get married. Well, it's one of the things that I'm very happy that I was wrong about. I did not see that we would have many things that have advanced as quickly as they have in Pennsylvania, being such a slow state for this. So I have some hope there, but I also have hope in terms of, where you have this sort of echo chamber of where reform-minded individuals in pushing against these disparities. And I agree with George. I find it so outrageous that you now have people making money on marijuana in Pennsylvania while people are sitting in jail, still being charged, or having those past offenses still prevent them from employment and so forth. So we have a lot to correct. And I think it is a big issue, but I'm hopeful, but I think we need to keep pushing.
Great points. Mr. Rosselli?
So I had a client recently who is on state parole for his offenses. He served his time, paid his debt back to society in state prison, comes home, and he has a qualifying diagnosis for medical marijuana. And the first part is that they fight that. They don't want you to have the benefit of the medicinal values of marijuana. They fight that through the parole and probation system. And we're getting better on that front. But the reason why this is important, this story is important, is there was a delay in him getting his card for about 7 months. So what he did is he went out and he bought marijuana. He was pulled over and he was arrested for the charge. The case was pending, and his parole agent detained him. I'm sorry, his county supervised judge, because he had finished his parole time. So the judge who is supervising him on county supervised probation detains him at the Allegheny County Jail during the middle of a pandemic. We fight to get him released. He is sent to a 3-quarter house. During that time, his daughter, his wife gives birth to their second child. So he missed that. During that time, there's a COVID outbreak at the facility that he's in. During that time, the state of Pennsylvania cleared $1 billion in revenue from the sale of marijuana. What are we doing?
Interesting, insightful, great question. All right, Mr. Rosselli, I need a number 1 through 26, sir.
Let's go 22.
22. All right. So Lisa Guzman says drug addiction should be treated as a disease and not a crime. I am speaking as a person who has never done hard drugs, but whose life has been affected by drug addiction through people I care about. What are your thoughts?
So as with most questions that involve the criminal justice system and how we approach things within that system, it always directs me to a specific case that I've handled over the course of my 20-year career. That question that Lisa poses takes me to one of my first clients. His name was Cody. Cody was, first time I met him, he was at the Allegheny County Jail. He was 120, 130 pounds at the time. Right around that time was when heroin sort of made its presence here in Western Pennsylvania. During that time, I went to 14 funerals in 14 months for clients who died from overdoses. When I saw Cody, I had very little doubt that he was on that same path. He had been arrested multiple times for possession charges. His prior record score was growing. But this time, when I sat down with Cody, he was charged with terroristic threats because of the way he reacted to his father's attempt to correct his behavior. So the case works through the system. The district attorney is unwilling to move on the charge. Cody is convicted of a misdemeanor terroristic threats charge. And he's released with a period of probation, slapped on the back, good luck to you. There's no plan in place for Cody when he's released. He's unemployable. His housing is scattered at best. The relationships that he had at that time were essentially burned based on his behavior. And I can appreciate that. However, we're talking about a 19-year-old kid who has an entire lifetime ahead of him. Despite the difficulties in getting employment, he continued to try, but he was struggling with relapse. I went to meetings with him, went to multiple NA meetings with him. I watched a day turn into a week into a month into a year, and now he's speaking at these meetings. I watched him fight for the custody of his firstborn child as I stood next to him and made those arguments. Obviously, his criminal history was part of the conversation. The best job he can get during that time was delivering pizzas, so that's what he did. But it wasn't enough to raise a small family. He tried to apply to drive for Uber. His application was rejected because of his criminal history. He attempted to get his barber's license. He ultimately did, but they held up the process for 7 months because of his criminal history. I can report back that now Cody is very clean, very happy, living with his wife and his 2 children. He asked me to be a groomsman in his wedding, which was an incredible honor. And he has his relationship with his father has improved, and they are good friends again. Now, Cody's the exception to this rule. I mean, Cody's the exception to this situation. Most people who are in the addiction at the stage that he was in, with the building criminal history, are unable to dig themselves out of that hole. And that cost is passed down to taxpayers, right? If Cody is unable to maximize his earning potential, he's more likely to be dependent on government programs. But Cody's the exception. There's an entire generation of young people who were ravaged by the opioid epidemic, who face the same struggles that Cody faces, who are not as lucky to dig themselves out. So it doesn't have to be that way. There are things that we can do if we're just spend some time in thought and realize it's not just about law and order. It's about what is best for the community. Is it best for the community that Cody has to deal with the social punishment above and beyond the justice punishment? Because that social punishment, that's the real life. That's your day-to-day. So I believe in a system that is thoughtful enough to recognize that it is beneficial not only to the offender, not only to the offender's family, but to the community as a whole to build Cody up and not hold him down. That's the system of justice we need. And right now, we're falling woefully short. That's all I have on that.
You know, just some personal thoughts. You know, I don't remember ever in the many elections that I've seen for Court of Common Pleas where we've had such a rich diversity of individuals with experience who can potentially change the system as we know it. I mean, I am so honored to have you guys. And I mean, just listening to your comments just gives me this warm feeling that I haven't had, you know, in 27, 28 years. I mean, I can't thank you guys enough. And then the fact that, you know, you guys are willing to come here today and to share your thoughts with your potential constituents. I mean, this is the first time I've ever done it, and I don't ever recall seeing it before. So, you know, definitely pat yourselves on the back. I encourage, you know, each and every one of my members that are watching this, you know, to contact, you know, Mrs. Wagner and Mr. Rosselli and Mr. Heym. I mean, they are approachable. You know, they are a part of this community and they stand for something. And I'm sure that if you have a question or concern, that they're willing to at least listen. You know, the next question I'm going to ask each and every one of you is why, you know, should any of our constituents, you know, elect you as judge? Based upon what I've seen, I mean, the question is kind of moot, but, you know, for the sake of our platform and for the sake of our agenda, I'm going to ask it anyway. So I'm going to start with you, Mrs. Wagner. Why should you be voted or elected judge as here in Allegheny County?
Sure. Well, I appreciate, again, you know, the opportunity to talk to everybody here. And just to segue on what you were mentioning before, Todd, it's something that I'd like to see our judicial branch be more transparent. And there are a lot of ways we should be able to have conversations with the community while still upholding our responsibilities. I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. So I hope in the future that we see a lot more openness and transparency from our court system, really. But as for me, I mentioned before that my belief is really that the role of a judge is twofold. One, adjudicating those cases before her or him in their own individual courtrooms. And I think for that, we need to elect judges who certainly have experience, who have compassion and have integrity. And I think that's just the threshold. I believe those are traits that I've exhibited that people can look at. For me, I have a pretty public advocacy history just by virtue of holding positions of county controller and state representative. So my bio is probably more out there in terms of what I believe is a career about speaking truth to power and holding institutions accountable. And I think the second part of being a judge that I think is so important that people often overlook, but I think is more important now, perhaps than ever, both in terms of our ability to really change the culture of our judicial system, but also with problems that we've had forever. You know, these aren't new problems that we're seeing. It's just that thankfully, perhaps some people are paying a little bit more attention. So we need judges who are able to exhibit leadership and really see their role not only in their own individual courtroom, but as real stewards of our justice system. So that's what I believe that I bring to this race as someone who is willing to do the hard work. And, you know, my career, I've shown that. I've made a lot of personal sacrifices that I believe are very much part of the job of holding public office, to have those hard conversations and really implement change. Because I think of it in terms of, no industry likes change. Government, however, is what I refer to as the culture of no. I think in Giuseppe's example, I believe earlier of district attorneys, because this is the way things have always been done, it is more baked in, I believe, to government than any other sector. And I would say within government, it is even more baked in to our justice system. And so to really turn that and to make that change, it is going to take a massive effort and a lot of diligence and a lot of fortitude. And I am hopeful that I would be able to bring something to that from my experience and really trying to push change within some of these very bureaucratic institutions in the past.
Thank you. Mr. Heym.
Thanks. I do want to start off by saying that, one of the points Giuseppe raised is very important. I, too, have lost so many clients. The nature of my practice, I do mostly DUI defense. So a lot of my clients have substance abuse issues, and the lack of empathy within the system for people in that position is frightening. Mandatory sentences. Nobody wants to consider alternatives, not just to jailing somebody, alternatives to charging somebody. Let's divert them before they hit the criminal justice system. Mm-hmm. That's the way that and frankly, that is a societal benefit as well. Less work for the prosecutors, less work for the judges, more healthy people and living people in our community. I feel that my experience, having been both a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney, having done hundreds and hundreds of trials over my career, I've literally spent almost every day in a courtroom for the past 20 years. That's what I do. I'm a trial attorney. I'm in the courtroom every day. Recently, some of the hearings are by video, but for the most part, that's the way that it works. But not only having that experience, but having the will to fight for change. As I said earlier, systemic change for an individual judge is hard. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try. And if we elect enough judges that are willing to do what needs to be done, we can force that systemic change. And I said earlier, so many judges, they're just checking the box. They're doing what every other judge has ever done, what they were told to do when they got to the courthouse after having been elected. And truthfully, I don't just want to think outside the box. I want to destroy that box. I want to build that box up again so that we have a system where it's not inherently unfair. And I don't want to steal a line from Giuseppe, but I'm going to. This is something, as he told you, we're very close friends and we talk about this on a regular basis. But Giuseppe made a point to me, and I hadn't thought of it this way, but he was 100% correct. And that's, we always say the system is broken, because it really is from the perspective of justice. But Giuseppe pointed out the system isn't really broken. It's working the way it was designed to work. Right? Our criminal justice system was set up to keep certain people down, to have unfair juries, to have whole segments of society that don't have equal access. And that's offensive. And that is why I say break it down, rebuild it. Thanks.
Great points. Mr. Rosselli.
Man, George, how are you going to take my line? Man, I was opening with that.
You still can.
It's all good.
I gave him credit.
So here's the deal. Real recognizes real. It's a line that I've essentially grown up with. It's something my dad used to talk to me about. You're either about it or you're not. And at some point, if you're talking like you are about it, and you're talking to people who care about the issues that you're talking about, they'll recognize when you're not real. And you'll lose all credibility with that group of people you're trying to reach. All I can tell to the voters of Allegheny County is for the last 3 weeks, I've been going to Democratic committee meetings and listening to 30 plus candidates talk about why they should be judged. And part of that conversation always is they're endorsed by this person. They, have the backing of these people. They almost always come around to equality and fairness and justice reform. And I'm thankful to hear that, because now I know that the ideas that I've embraced for as long as I've embraced them are actually having a mainstream there's a mainstream conversation with people who are seeking positions of power. But real recognizes real. You don't have to listen to me tell you that I will be fair, that I honor equality, that I am thoughtful in how I want to do the job on the bench. I have a 20-year career, a record that you can look back at that proves that for me. I've been in court essentially every day of my life fighting for equality, fighting for fairness. Nothing is going to change when I'm on the bench. Equality is equality. There is no different version of it. Everybody is equal under the law. And right now, there is an unconscious bias with people of power within our justice system. And the problem is so big that they don't see it. We're still trying to get people to understand that racism exists in our justice system over the course of the entire 2020 year. That's exhausting. That's exhausting. Hold on one second, I apologize. What we need for this election is a group of judges to take the bench who believe as I believe, who think as I think, that there is a much better way to do the business of justice. And until we have that transformation to what this is to what we currently have, we're going to continue to spin our wheels and the cycle of injustice will continue. Thank you.
Well, I can tell you one thing, Martin Luther King would be smiling. These are really, really important issues that demand that we take a really hard look at ourselves, that we be honest about it, and that no matter how comfortable the answer might be, is that we don't shirk away from our responsibility to do what's good. I thank each and every one of you sincerely. And you guys know me. So sometimes I'm sure you've heard me say things that you probably shouldn't politically say, but I say them anyway because I care. But I will say this. The fact that you guys are here on my show right now means so much to me. I wish you so much so much success, in your respective campaigns. I personally support all of you because I know that you will do good, if elected to the bench. To our viewers, you've got some really, really, really good choices to make. And I hope that you don't shirk away from those choices based upon party partisanship. It really doesn't matter whether the person is a Republican or a Democrat. It's what do they stand for? This is your opportunity to determine what these individuals stand for, and are you willing to support them as they embark upon our judicial bench for judge. Thank you, Mrs. Wagner. Thank you, Mr. Rosselli. Thank you, Mr. Heym, from the bottom of my heart. If you guys have any questions, or if any one of our constituents would like to contact one of you, Ms. Wagner, how can they find you?
So by email, it's info@electchelsa, which is CHELSA.com. And we also actually just put our website up, which is electchelsa.com. All of the information is there.
Very simple and direct. Mr. Heym.
A couple of ways to reach me. First is Facebook. So on Facebook, it's /Heym4Judge, the number 4. It's all one word. My website is Heym4Judge, again, the number 4.com. That is under construction. It won't be back up for a couple of days. And I'm also going to give you my personal email. Anybody that has a question, a concern, can reach out to me 24/7. It's george.heym, Heym, at comcast.net.
All right. And Mr. Rosselli.
So you can reach me at my website at www.rosselli4judge.com. That's ROSSELLI. You can also reach me by email at Giuseppe, that's GIUSEPPE, at Rosselli4judge.com.
All right. All right. I can't tell you how much, I've enjoyed this. This has been an awesome show. You guys are superstar candidates. I can't wait to watch how things develop. For our viewers, definitely please tune into these guys. I mean, these are the superstars of our future. If you like this show and you want to see others, hey, please do me a favor, hit subscribe, hit like, leave a comment, let us know what you think. I know there are many places that you could be in the world, but you're right here with me today, and I appreciate that. All right, guys, you have a good day. I can't wait to see what happens going forward. Good luck in your candidacies. Thank you.